The Talk Shop.
Well, the Talk Shop coming to you this evening from the University of the Western Cape, broadcasting from the National Research Foundation's Science for Society lecture at the Life Sciences Building. And the topic is human development, individual and society. Well, we heard there from Dr. Chris Desmond, who gave us a very much a sort of societal overview, the broad picture. But next up we're going to hear from Dr. Linda Richter, who's going to focus right down on the individual. Dr. Linda Richter is the director of the DST, NRF Centre of Excellence in Human Development at the University of Witwatersrand. She's also an NRF A-rated scientist and a distinguished research fellow at the Human Sciences Research Council. Let me tell you a little bit about her, though. She's standing there ready to roll, but let's just give you some of the details about Dr. Richter. She's conducted both basic and policy research in the fields of child, youth and family development, published more than 400 papers and book chapters, and serves on the editorial boards of several professional and disciplinary journals. Also the author of several very, very important books and monographs, including Mandela's Children, Growing Up in Post-Apartheid South Africa, The Importance of Caregiver-Child Interactions for the Survival and Healthy Development of Young Children, and Baba, Men and Fatherhood in South Africa. As I did say, very important titles all. Also, she's an honorary professor in psychology and an elected fellow of the University of KwaZulu-Natal and the Early Childhood Development Advisor to the World Health Organization in Geneva. So she comes with very strong credentials. Dr. Linda Richter, lovely to have you. Thank you very much and look forward to what you have to tell us.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and good evening to everyone. I'm very grateful for the broad portrait that Chris Desmond gave about societal development, and this provides the context for my presentation on individual development. So individual development is the study of human beings from conception, actually even preconception, to death and beyond. My field of study is early development, infancy and the preschool period. But there are no neat boundaries across the continuity of human development. And to understand early development requires that we understand the life course as well as intergenerational effects. Now, what are intergenerational effects? They're the hand-me-downs that you get from your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents. Now, I indicated that I would speak about the new science of child development. By emphasizing new, I don't want to imply that the science of child development is new. Not at all. Children have been the subject of scholarship for all of documented time, and the science of child development is old as the science of psychology itself. The first identified scientific study was conducted in 1895 by G. Stanley Hall, the inaugural president of the American Psychological Association. And it was on something only children, one-child families, who he concluded were permanent oddballs and misfits. Simultaneously, alongside the science, arose a cottage industry of parenting advice that has swung with the pendulum changes in grand theories, principally behaviorism, psychoanalysis, phenomenology, cultural anthropology, and evolutionary psychology. Nevertheless, what we know now, and we've known for more than 100 years, is that children are not small adults who just get bigger. And we have learned some remarkably new things about human development during the last 40 years. What I call the new science of early child development begins with the uptake of new technologies and very rapid developments in the methods used to study children, which became apparent in the mid to late 1970s when I was a postgraduate student in the United Kingdom. And when one of these methodological innovations began to advance, and that was the microanalysis of videotaped interactions between babies and their mothers to try and understand how language develops and how children come to be intentional beings with the appreciation of the minds and intentions of other people. Psychology is an empirical discipline founded on observation, but the methodological advances I'm going to describe each opened up an entirely new set of examinations, new knowledge, new theory, and new applications. Beginning in several places at once, linguists, pediatricians, applied philosophers, psychologists, and others began to dissect the spontaneous interactions between mothers and their babies, both in natural conditions and experimental conditions, using videotape, a technology that only became available in the mid-1950s. Using innovative designs such as putting video cameras on tripods behind each of a mother and baby pair, opposite one another, and synchronizing the recordings through a mixer, an observer could, as it were, get inside these interactions. Using these technologies, we were able to demonstrate at 2 to 3 weeks of age that young infants could imitate human facial expressions. Through progressive subsequent inquiry, it is now believed that the human brain has a system of what are called mirror neurons that enable infants to imitate the actions of others, but not only imitate them, but to do so in an interpretive way. And in this way, babies experience empathy with other human beings as well as intersubjectivity. So if you make a high five with a toddler, for example, they do what you do, not what it looks like to them. Through their emotional engagement with each other, infant and mothers or other intimate caregivers come to synchronize their behavioral and emotional states, developing what are called Proto Conversations or pre-speech dialogues. This primary intersubjectivity, the knowing of another person, develops into secondary intersubjectivity, or joint attention, interest, understanding, and ultimately sharing language and thought about objects, people, and events beyond just the two of them. This is the process the Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky described, by which the interpsychological or the interpersonal becomes the intrapersonal, or comes to constitute the mind of the infant. Colin Trevathan, my mentor at the University of Edinburgh in the early 80s, went on to devise additional tests of the interpersonal capacities of babies by video recording mother and baby in separate rooms and simultaneously playing the high-quality recordings to each other. Both responded in the same joyful, natural ways as if they were sitting opposite one another in one room. Then he disrupted their exchanges by adjusting the mother's recording and playing back to the baby a delay, or playing the baby last week's mother's recording, in which she was talking to her child, talking in the distinctive high-pitched tone we call motherese. But disruptions can be induced in other ways, by asking mothers to sit still, or what we call still face, being expressionless and not replying to their babies. By 5 months of age, this treatment distresses babies intensely, causing them to make increasingly frantic efforts to restore contingent interaction, the interaction in which their actions are met with matching actions by another. These experiments, based on microcoding of these second-by-second interactions between mothers and babies, forcefully demonstrate that infants expect, recognize, and depend on specific forms of communication with other human beings. This groundbreaking work not only rested on the videotape, the ability to view individual frames in a dynamic way through computer-controlled programs, but also on advances in desktop computer power to handle large streams of time-coded visual data, as well as the application of statistical techniques to uncover the inherent complementarity of these early interactions. At the same time as we were learning more about infants and the processes by which they come to acquire human capabilities through their experiences with other people, the neurosciences were also rapidly evolving with new technologies. Electroencephalograms, or EEGs, readings of the electrical activity in the brain, first used on humans in 1924, were computerized and began to be complemented by an increasingly sophisticated range of imaging techniques. Both the structure and the function of the brain can be examined through infrared light, magnetic fields, and radio waves to detect blood flow and oxygenation and thereby provide a measure of function. One of the most dramatic applications of this work is the demonstration of the massive physical growth and functionality of the brain during fetal development and early childhood, as well as shocking images of underdevelopment of certain brain structures among young children reared from a young age in orphanages, children who have been deprived of the sort of sensitive and responsive caregiving that was so well documented in the interaction studies. Stunting among children, who are children short for their age, a condition that affects nearly a third of South African children under 3 years of age, is also believed to result in changes in brain structure and function. In the latest application of these techniques, the brain functioning of mothers and babies in interaction with one another are being examined using the same video technologies that I talked about, using magnetoencephalography, or MEG, the measurement of magnetic fields produced by electrical activity in the brain. Mothers and babies are each placed in separate MEG machines and shown live video of each other interacting. Now, we're all aware of the advances in genetics leading up to and following the Human Genome Project, but there's no one-to-one relationship between a genotype and a phenotype. Genes do not simply translate into behaviors, features, or functions. Rather, there's a range of molecular and synaptic adaptations that modify the expression of the genetic code in response to the fetal environment and the postnatal environment, as well as to the environmental influences throughout life. Epigenetics is the study of these adaptations. Or, as someone put it, DNA writes the script for the play, but epigenetics creates the infinite possibilities for a particular production. Now, epigenetics joins up biology and developmental psychology and erases the distinction between nature and nurture. For example, the function of the brain doesn't emanate unidirectionally from its structure. Instead, structure, genetic activity, and maturation are shaped by experience, is bidirectional or probabilistic, with structures producing action and action producing feedback and causing structural modifications in an ongoing system that causes genetic potential to be switched on and off to a greater or lesser degree. In the last 20 to 30 years, a huge amount has been learned about the epigenetics, particularly with respect to adaptations occurring during this very sensitive period of early development, which has come to be called the first 1,000 days. This comprises the 9 months or 270 days of pregnancy and the 365 days in each of the first 2 years of postnatal life. In particular, the effects of exposure in utero and in early infancy to nutrition, to toxins, infections and stresses have been the subject of intensive study. For example, chronic diseases such as diabetes, hypertension and heart disease are believed to be programmed in utero through nutritional and other exposures which permanently change the structure and metabolism of organ systems. Now, a similar model has been applied to high levels of circulating maternal stress hormones during pregnancy, which seem to permanently program the child's emotional responsivity, ability to manage stress, and inhibit what we call innate flight or fight reactions. Many of these structural and metabolic adaptations are in the service of conserving energy for brain development, because the brain is the most costly organ in the human body. In newborn infants, the brain uses 97% of what has been called the body's metabolic budget. This drops to about 44% by age 5 years. If a child's circumstances as a result of stress or undernutrition or other factors reduces the energy available, the structure and function of the fast-developing brain suffers. Now, another methodological advance, the study of development and behavior over the long term, has enabled us to reap the benefits of the mother-child interaction studies, the brain and epigenetic studies, and to understand better how health and human capital in adulthood are affected by conditions in early childhood. Importantly, we also get a better understanding of what is needed to protect the brain, other organ systems, and emotional and behavioral patterns of the child, so that they don't take these factors into adulthood. Both descriptive and intervention studies, starting 40 to 50 years ago, are now yielding evidence, including in low and middle-income countries, and we have contributed to those studies, of how pregnancy and early childhood effects enduring into adulthood and subsequent generations. For example, our study in Soweto, the Birth to 20 Plus study, started in 1989 as one of the 5 big long-term studies in developing countries. Data from this consortium, together with the Philippines, Brazil, India and Guatemala, have produced convincing evidence of the importance of poverty, nutrition, maternal age, breastfeeding and other factors on long-term health and human capital. Our combined analyses, for example, of education indicate that children who are stunted before their second birthday end up with 1 year less of schooling than their more fortunate counterparts. Similarly, long-term follow-ups of interventions provided to young disadvantaged children show dramatic positive effects on education and adult earnings. For example, children under 3 years of age in Guatemala who were given a protein supplement as adults ended up working fewer hours at higher wages and achieved 46% higher earnings than children who received a less nutritious food in childhood. Importantly, the supplement was only effective if children received it before 3 years of age. A second long-term follow-up, published this year in Science, showed that stunted children who received compensatory cognitive stimulation in the first 24 months of age attained 25% higher earnings as adults than controls, enabling them to completely catch up with their non-stunted peers. Now, so what do we know? What has this corpus of interesting work conducted during the last 40 years, as well as all over the world, as well as in South Africa, taught us? And I haven't even started on the enormous discoveries being made in what is called the microbiome, that is in the ecology of the microorganisms that inhabit all of us, and how these function, particularly in the contact between mother and baby, immediately during birth and after birth, to condition aspects of a child's immune system. So, but let me summarize what, at least from my particular disciplinary perspective, what I think we have learned. One, babies are not born with empty minds and a learning machine. Infants don't learn to be human through a mechanical interchange with their physical and social environment and a simple accumulation of knowledge. Rather, our evolutionary past has prepared us in very special ways to be human beings. From days after birth, babies react to human beings differently to the way they react to objects. Babies look preferentially at human faces, they listen preferentially to the human voice, and almost immediately after birth learn to recognize the sight, sound, smell and feel of people who love and look after them. They are born to find others who love and show interest within them and communicate with them. They develop deep emotional attachments to and trust in their loved ones, and through this channel of emotional understanding, learn also to share understanding of the world and the ways to communicate about it. So babies learn not only language and thought in this way, but also patterns of feeling and methods to control their feelings. They learn to feel loved and secure, to have confidence in their ability to explore and investigate their world. Some very unfortunate children have experiences that teach them they are not loved, and that the only way to protect themselves is through aggression or withdrawal. Now, a great deal of this learning is packed into the first 1,000 days. Development happens very quickly, and there are no practice runs. This early period of development is a window of opportunity because systems are highly adaptable and they change fast. But this plasticity declines very quickly. And at no other point in the life course can so much be gained and so much lost. Gaps and weaknesses in this period widen over time and become harder and harder to fix. The principal environment for these time-critical developments is a human environment. It is parents, people who are devoted to, who love and care for a young child. And as adults too, we are prepared by our human history for this task. But interest in and nurture of a young child is dependent on how well parents themselves are cared for, by those who love them, by the communities and societies who value and support them. The human baby, in common with the marsupial, is born too soon and needs to be closely protected in the first 2 years of life. It is perhaps an important illustration that kangaroo care, skin-to-skin contact, effectively protects vulnerable young infants. The more a child is protected from stress, undernutrition, illness, rejection, cruelty, and the more opportunities and support a child has to learn, the better consolidated is their development and the greater their potential to reach their human story. These findings tell the story of the successes of the individual life and writ large and multiplied many times the success of a society as a whole. A recent study in 4 African countries on the knock-on effects of undernutrition on education, earnings and social inclusion estimate that between 2 and 16% of GDP is lost in the 4 countries studied to date. Based on this knowledge, what are we doing in South Africa? Encouragingly, there is policy interest in early child development in South Africa. The first 1,000 days, the importance of early learning, nutrition, healthcare and protection are prominent in our National Development Plan under the sections on health and education. Early care and preschool education were incorporated in the last election manifesto of the ANC. The first of the diagnostic reviews conducted by the Department of Performance Monitoring and Evaluation in collaboration with relevant government departments was the first of the diagnostic reviews conducted by the presidency. But there's also evidence of decisive action. As one example, and it's something not many people know, South Africa has the only fully government-supported and funded universal preschool year in a low and middle-income country, with a coverage of over 80%. But there's still a great deal to be done. Besides the health and social provisions already available, the Early Child Development Diagnostic Review identified a number of issues that need attention if we're to improve the prospects of young children that are boldly supported by current scientific evidence. Care of women during pregnancy and delivery is critical, especially with respect to poor nutrition, HIV infection, substance use, exposure to violence, and poor mental health. Several studies in South Africa show that around 30% of pregnant women and new mothers have clinical levels of reported depressive symptomatology. Young children need good nutrition and protection from violence and neglect, as well as opportunities to learn from interested and encouraging adults. Children especially need to talk with others, sing and be read to foster their literacy capacities. Young parents on their side want security, information and encouragement, and they need quality and affordable childcare when they return to work. And for children, all of these things have to be provided together through coherent societal commitments and actions. It is my vision that this new Centre of Excellence in Human Development will play a very strong role in supporting South Africa to get the work done for children. Thank you very much.
Dr. Linda Richter with some powerful words there and some very, very powerful thoughts. And I don't know if we've got any young or parents of young children in the audience, but if you're feeling any pressure, rightly you should be, because I think it seems to me that the state of our development is very much in the hands of parents. You're listening to the Talk Shop here on SAFM, coming to you live from the University of the Western Cape, listening to the National Research Foundation's Science for Society lecture at the Life Sciences Building. The topic of the conference, or at least the lectures, once again, is human development, individuals and society. We've heard the bigger picture there from Dr. Chris Desmond. We've heard the more individual picture from Dr. Linda Richter, and I'm hoping that you've got some input. Certainly many, many issues have been raised, and I think it's lots we've got to get through. So if you'd like to give us a call and give us your input, your questions, your thoughts on feelings and what you've heard, 0891 104 207 is the number to give us a call on, 0891 104 207. Or if you want to pop us a simple SMS, you can do that. It's 34701, 34701. We're looking forward to getting some responses and thoughts from our audience right here at the UWC. You're listening to The Talk Shop. Stay with us.
The Talk Shop.
The Talk Shop, it is, coming to you live from the University of the Western Cape, where we've been listening to a couple of lectures entitled, or collectively entitled, Human Development, Individuals, Society and Society. We've been listening to Dr. Chris Desmond and Dr. Linda Richter, who are with me right now. And just before we cross to the news, Linda, wonderful. That was such an unbelievably interesting. And I'm just wishing I could wind back the clock and bring up my children in a slightly different way. And it's also interesting, and also for you, Chris, if I may call you Chris, Chris and Linda, if I can do that. You know, what you've had to say has been the result of so many years of research. I often wonder, with people who have spent so much time in research and study, how you manage to synthesize it. Because behind your research, Linda, there have been years of study, of passion. Nonetheless, you don't seem to have become sort of blasé about it. It still fills you with hot pink passion, the colour of the jacket that you're wearing. Is it something that, you know, sometimes you think, I can't do this anymore?
No, never. I introduced myself at the dinner last night, and the first word I said is, I've always been known as the tired child who can't go to bed. I've never stopped being excited by this. Every year, something new, something unbelievable. I mean, as the technology changes, so becomes our increased capacity to understand more and more about how miraculous human development actually is. And I'm not intimidated by these findings of what it requires for a child to grow and develop. Not at all, and neither should any parent. In fact, parents need to relax back into it, because just as the baby has been prepared, so have parents. They need to feel secure, and we're learning much more about the importance of maternal mood and paternal mood and emotional state and depression and the effects of emotions on the capacity of parents to parent in a natural, intuitive way.
Yes, what you had to say about stress there impacting, and you think of the way things are here in South Africa. Sometimes you pick up the newspaper and you get stressed, which impacts enormously on the bigger picture, Chris. Do you sometimes sort of think, this is too big, I can't cope? There was a huge amount of thought you've put into there from some very very intensely thoughtful people. Do you sometimes feel overwhelmed?
Oh, I wouldn't say overwhelmed. I mean, the challenges are huge, but as I was trying to say in the talk, is that they're challenges for all of us. And so if one faces them alone, one would feel incredibly nervous or incapable. But as a group, I think, and as a country, we're perfectly capable of taking these things on.
Yes, and I think it is all about half glass full, not half a glass empty, and it's very easy to become sort of pressured and unhappy and so on. But it's not a good thing to do, and we're going to be looking on the bright side of human development right here in South Africa, both from a broader picture, societal picture, and also from an individual point of view. And if you as individuals have got thoughts that you'd like to share with us, you would be most welcome. You can give us a call. The number is 0891 104 207. If you want to just pop us an SMS, just a quick thought, you can do that to 34701. You're listening to the Talk Shop here on SAFM. It's time for the news. We'll be back right after the news, but right now it is 8 o'clock. Time for the news with Greg House.